culture, and employment. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and talk about the
Okay.
workplace.
Yes, let's, yeah, so here we've just been talking generally in society, what we've seen, just around us, but I want to switch gears to talking about the workplace and what we see in the workplace. So overall, to what extent do you believe your workplace accommodates employees with disabilities? Not at all, somewhat, a lot, and not sure. You have 6 seconds left. All right. So what we see here is that, actually only one person said not at all. 25 say somewhat, 7 say a lot, and 6 not sure. So yeah, definitely very few say a lot. So to a large extent, while people with disabilities, employees with disabilities are considered, it's only somewhat. Elizabeth, do you have any reactions as well to what you see? Elizabeth?
Well, it's interesting. I'm really curious, and people feel free to put in the chat where you're coming from. I'm really interested to see what kind of organizations you're coming from. But when you say somewhat, can you give some examples of what that means for you? And this is not surprising because there may be a little bit of, you know, accommodation happening in the workplace, but it's not true for inclusion. So it may be kind of piecemeal, so to speak. So let's talk a little bit more about why accessibility should be part of the DEI efforts. What are your thoughts about why you feel or think accessibility needs to be part of the DEI initiative? So type your ideas.
Yeah, what are the benefits? What do we get out of including accessibility into DEI initiatives? So we have 44 seconds left.
Very great point, Linda. Our organization works with individuals who ask for accommodation, but they don't broadcast that it's an option. People who don't know to ask face challenges, they shouldn't have to, exactly, because the burden is often placed on people with disabilities to have to advocate for themselves all the time.
5 seconds left.
Tabitha says, at a small tech startup, we prioritize accessibility for our end users, but for instance, our website lacks accessibility. Very good point. But great.
Okay,
So
so
let's see what we've got here. We've got inclusion of a wide range of people who can provide unique approaches, ideas, various opportunities for all, diversity of thought and experience, a wider range of opinions and experiences. Exactly. Belonging is just that there's space for everyone to thrive at work, attracting more workers, more diverse work group, more people to contribute. There's a lot of common themes here about belonging and contributions of people with disabilities, because people with disabilities really are good problem solvers in the workplace and really have a unique perspective to offer. Um, as people said, diverse perspective makes a stronger equity and belonging, helps everyone. Diverse teams are stronger teams. Equitable opens opportunities. You guys are really on the ball with this.
yeah, I really
Ready?
love this point, Elizabeth, if you don't mind me chiming in, especially about how it helps everyone. When we think about accessibility for everyone, we all benefit. So for example, even when we think about sidewalks, right? And the ramps that help, originally they were built more for wheelchair access. But now everybody uses it because we roll our suitcases and so forth, and it helps us all, right? So when we think about creating things that are more accessible for everyone, it actually can help everyone as well.
And that really is the key. If you have captioning, it doesn't just benefit people with hearing loss, it benefits everyone. It benefits people who have anxiety. They need to look away or look at something else because there's too much stimulation. There's lots of reasons why people use captioning. Um,
Yeah, I also love this point about ensuring that everyone is able to bring all of their talents to the table. We are all multidimensional and we have a lot to bring to the table. And when you allow for accessibility, it really allows for more of that inclusion and that belonging and innovation, as someone had said down here as well.
Yes, and when you think about intersectionality, we don't bring one part of ourselves to work. There's so many different parts of ourselves that people often don't know about that are hidden. And so when you have additional characteristics on top of being disabled, it makes access so much more difficult. So if I'm a disabled person and I'm also a person of color and I'm LGBTQ, it just makes that all the more difficult to access anything, whether it's health, arts and culture, employment, and so on. And so if we want to be emphasizing or attaining diversity in the workplace, race is often considered, but also disability needs to be considered, and also other marginalized identities need to be considered because, as people pointed out, the more diverse background, the more wealth of knowledge that you have to offer.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Again,
also, Betty, we forgot to talk about retaining employees. It's
yeah,
really
yeah,
important, right?
yes,
And that's
yes,
good for the
yes.
next one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did want to bring up the point here. It's about, the entire employee life cycle, in fact, right? So here it mentions increase in talent pool in terms of the hiring and the recruiting, which is the first phase of the employee life cycle, right? But it also impacts employee retention. Really, what will foster that greater sense of belonging where people want to stay and they feel motivated to stay? It also, it impacts, different other areas of the employee life cycle, including, the development and the coaching and so forth. And also it impacts the ultimate promotions in terms of, are we being accessible, and how does that impact the ability for people with disabilities to be promoted? So really thinking about accessibility in DEI initiatives really impacts the entire employee life cycle, from the recruitment to the retention to the development and the coaching. So how do we empower people? And then also ultimately the advancements, so the promotions and the ability for people to rise within an organization. So with that, let's actually move on to, and in fact, let's see, we have no, it was just a brainstorm, so not an effective or meaningful leaderboard. So my organization does a good job of, hold on, my screen is, of considering people with disabilities in these parts of the employee life cycle. I'd love to hear. So it is multi-select. You can select recruitment, talent acquisition, development, retention, and also advancement, promotions. So my organization does a good job of considering people with disabilities in these parts of the employee life cycle. Okay, so it seems as though there's, there is a good distribution, but it seems as though the largest portion, actually, in terms of where employees with disabilities are considered, is just in the recruitment and talent acquisition phase, and much less so in terms of retention, development, and advancement. Elizabeth, I'd love to hear any perspectives that you want to share, any reactions, reflections based on what you see here.
Well, I think the retention is a big deal because the fact that it's so low indicates to me that organizations often do not put a lot of time and thought into intentionally developing and helping their employees advance. And when you think about the professional opportunities that exist, that everybody has a chance to take advantage of, it becomes very difficult for people with disabilities to take advantage of the same opportunities if they don't have access, if they don't have accommodations, if they don't have the same kind of opportunities to participate. So I think about my own job experiences and thinking about how difficult it was sometimes to do those professional opportunities and development opportunities, and thinking about how much more difficult it would be for others with disabilities, and also the development piece, training and coaching, and really having mentors and having people who are allies, because I think allyship is something that is lacking in the workplace. And really having allies to speak up on behalf of a person with disability. Not that people with disabilities need to be helped, but it's helpful if you can advocate with your among your colleagues. We all need to face this person if they need to really like me. We all need to be more conscientious about including them in our conversations. You know how often people meet at the water cooler and have conversations at the water cooler. People with hearing loss can really benefit from that. So it's hard to have a sense of belonging if employees are not really aware of what they can be doing to be allies in the workplace.
Yeah, and I also just want to add, so the work that Inspiring Diversity does is really cuts across all dimensions of diversity. And I just want to mention that, based on what we've seen, in fact, actually across different demographics, that oftentimes there is a lot of focus on the recruitment and the talent acquisition piece of bringing in diverse populations, and unfortunately really not enough focus on the retention, development, advancement. So really retaining people, creating that truly inclusive culture where diversity can truly thrive and you can actually reap the benefits of diversity. It's not enough to just hire diverse talent, including those with disabilities. You need to create that truly inclusive environment to help that population thrive and for everyone to thrive and to really benefit from the diversity that the different groups bring to the table. So I just wanted to mention that it seems to be, unfortunately, a common phenomenon that happens, which is unfortunate. But so there really needs to be a lot more attention as well spent on retention, development, and advancement and promotions. So
Betty, this is great. And Marian had some really good points about why people see accessibility as a burden. And I want to make the point that it's not a checklist. And a lot of organizations feel like it's a checklist. Okay, I've hired a trainer. Check. Everybody is diverse now. Or I've asked one person to be on the board who is disabled or a person of color. Check. Our board is diverse. But it doesn't quite work that way. It needs to be intentional to integrate all of these things within your policies, within your handbooks, within your training, within all your protocols within the organization. And it's not just a one off type of thing, but a constant um, intentional quality improvement process.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of it too is very behavioral. So in terms of the work that TIQ does, so one of the companies that I mentioned that I run, which stands for the Think, Act, Interact Quotient. Yes, historically, it's been relatively easy to just measure representation, like, oh, we have X number of employees with disabilities, Y number of people from this background, that background, right? But ultimately, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, a lot of times it is about the inclusion piece, right? Numbers will be numbers, but then the leading indicators and the things that will ultimately impact the retention and the advancement of those people through the ranks, right, will really be dependent on the inclusive culture that it's built. So really ensuring that you can embed conscious inclusion into cultural DNA, empowering people to think, act, and interact inclusively, truly inclusively, and know what it means to be inclusive. I think it's really important because a lot of times people will throw around this term of being inclusive, but they don't really know what that means, right? But you need to break it down to those specific behaviors, and we can talk a little bit more about it. But it's really about being very tactical and empowering people to be able to be inclusive in their specific behaviors on a day-to-day basis. So I just wanted to mention that.
And really, if you're talking about equity and inclusion, how can you be inclusive if it's not accessible? So that's why DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, needs to have accessibility as part of it, because it's very difficult to have a space that's welcoming and inclusive if it's not accessible. If you ask people to join your organization, but you don't have a ramp to get in the building, and they have to go around the back of the building. You're trying to be inclusive, but you're not really being inclusive if they have to go around the back of the building. And we can have many more examples like that. But I also want to say that there's a lot of implicit bias about people with disabilities, and ableism is one of the major barriers to integrating people with disabilities in the workplace. And so I do a lot of training and thought partnership with people around ableism and what that means, and trying to teach people about people with disabilities are people. They're just people, and being open and curious and lean into your discomfort. If you have a colleague who's disabled, be open and curious. Some people may not want to talk about the disability. They may be private about it, but if you take a stance of being curious and open and loving, then people will be more likely to open up to you.
Yeah, I have to piggyback off of this, and I love your specific use of the words open and curious. So, in terms of the 8 inclusive behaviors that TIQ has found actually make up inclusion, um, actually, open and curious are 2 of them. So they're being open, aware, unbiased, performance goal oriented, curious, culturally competent, collaborative, and courageous. And even skills like empathy are a combination of being open, aware, unbiased, curious, and culturally competent. So it's really important for us to embrace specific inclusive behaviors in order to be truly inclusive of people. And it is very, and Elizabeth, you mentioned ableism. It's very easy for many of us to adopt this ableist mindset because for example, I myself, I don't know of have myself having any disabilities, and it is easy to unconsciously have this ableist mindset because I only know what I know, right? And so it's really important to try to put ourselves in the shoes of others, right, and think about accessibility that way.
Yes, and guess what? I have some news for you all. All of us are going to join the Disability Club at one point or another, whether it's temporary or permanent. But as we age, and we have an aging population in this society, really fast aging population, and so it behooves organizations to really think about accessibility, both from a consumerist point of view and an employee point of view. So why don't we move on to some strategies? Let's do a little brainstorm.
So what are some ways that organizations can improve the recruitment process to accommodate people with disabilities? So we have 86 seconds left. Would love for you to share your thoughts. What are some ways that organizations can improve the recruitment process to accommodate people with disabilities? And for those of you who joined late and didn't notice, you can still log into the Kahoot. The game pin is 975-1811, as noted on the bottom right-hand corner. 33 seconds left.
And feel free to put questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can with the time left.
10 seconds.
Thank you so much, Marion and Linda and everyone else sharing such great comments in the chat. Really helps with the learning process. So let's see what we've got. Betty, do you want to summarize?
Yeah, sure. So really great, great things in terms of what people are providing. Offer alternative formats for applications and interviews. So accessibility options during recruiting process. Yeah, so interviewing differently. And so not just by phone or Zoom, doing an accessibility review with the candidate beforehand. Yeah, so really planning for that, right? So yes, again, it's about providing options, right? And not just assuming one size fits all, right? Online applications that are readable by screen readers, follow accessibility, yeah, protocols for online posts, offer accommodations, ask valid ID, not driver's license, yes, on job descriptions, center relationships, leverage the experience of people that live with them. Interesting. Train hiring managers to be more receptive to individuals with disabilities. Absolutely. It's about training those in the whole process, right? Of that are involved in the recruiting process. So toolkits and resources, specifying that tasks can be completed in various ways. Yes, so being very inclusive in terms of the description and also expectations, right? Being explicit in job posts about the hiring timeline and activities, prioritizing skills that allow for neurodivergence, sending interview questions ahead of time. Interesting. Offering multiple means of interviewing. Yes. Yes. Providing those questions in advance. Work with outside agencies, such as vocational specialists or candidates. State which accommodations already exist. I think that's very important as well. Engage people who are disabled in the conversation for ideas. Yes, it's so important to leverage the talent that you have within to create solutions that actually make sense for certain population. Yes, connect with university officers that provide resources to disabled students. Yes, make sure that the process is accommodating for visible disabilities as well. Yeah, offering employees with disabilities to select personnel. Work with disability community to make this happen. Yes, and oftentimes like people may say, well, I've heard this, especially with other problems. Oh, we can't find people of a certain background, or we can't really find people. The resources are out there, so you can definitely find it if you look. So there should be no excuses about not being able to hire people with disabilities or find the right talent. Partnering with organizations to learn more about disabilities, create a positive reputation as a company when it comes to disabilities. Absolutely. Think first about culture, universal needs before recruiting, explain what is already offered, and ask about anything you can provide. Yeah, and ask people for preferences. Don't just make an assumption, and also be very public. Have an accessibility statement on your website. So those were some of the ideas. I think they were really excellent, but Elizabeth, I welcome and any reflections or comments that you have, and then others as well in the chat. And then again, we're going to open it up later to Q&A as well.
This is a fantastic list. And I think, from the very beginning of the recruitment process, it needs to be explicit that this whole process is accessible from the get go, not halfway into the process, not at the interview process, but right at the beginning when you're forming those job descriptions. Are you using welcoming and inclusive language in those job descriptions that make people feel that they can apply? A lot of times you see job descriptions with things like excellent communication skills. And right then and there, you've eliminated a lot of people, people who stutter, people who may have a hearing loss, who sign, etc., etc. So maybe having language like effective and flexible communication is an example that I've seen. Um, and thinking about offering accommodations in interviews. Is there anything that you need to make the interview process uh, accessible for you, and just having that welcoming and inclusive language from the get-go, and also having applications that are easy to fill out for people who are low vision or people who are neurodivergent. Any upfront information as much as possible is really great for those people who have anxiety or who take just a little bit longer to process information. As someone said, in the chat. And also allowing people to have the camera on or off. For me, I really benefit from having the camera on just because I read lips, but I'm totally flexible as long as I have the captions there. So just really asking the person and meeting them where they're at. It's not a cookie cutter approach. Each person is different. What I need is going to be very different from what another person with hearing loss needs. Some people with hearing loss need sign language interpreters. Other people need captioning. Other people need both. So it's really important to offer all of those, and that means including that in the budget. So a lot of people say, oh, it's too expensive or whatnot. But when you think about the return on investment, it's going to pay off in the long run because you're going to have these amazing employees who work extra hard and go the extra mile to make sure that the organization gets what they need.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to emphasize the importance of remembering that one size does not fit all. And oftentimes, and this goes back to Elizabeth, what you were saying before about, ableism, right? And oftentimes those who, are abled, right, will think, oh, of course, should do Zoom. Everybody should have their cameras on, because we all want to see each other's facial expressions and so forth. But again, one size does not fit all. And, not even just with, in terms of people with disabilities, for various reasons, people may feel uncomfortable having their cameras on. And we just need to keep that in mind that one size does not fit all. What works for you does not necessarily work for everybody else.
Thank you, everybody. This is great. And we have one more slide left about retention, training, and
Okay,
advancement.
yes. So we're going to do, so what are some ways that organizations can better retain, develop, and advance employees with disabilities? So similar to the other one, would love to hear your thoughts. And we will recap. So we have another 80 seconds for you to put your thoughts on what are some ways that organizations can better retain, develop, and advance employees with disabilities. So retaining in terms of creating that sense of belonging, developing and really so empowering and coaching, and then advancing in terms of promotions and really helping people with disabilities to ascend through the organization. 40 seconds. 7 seconds left. Okay, so we have a number of responses and ideas. So some ideas include ask employees about their desires for advancement and provide related resources. Help them feel valued that they belong at work. I think that's so important, as opposed to people feeling like they're not valued, that they're somehow a burden or not contributing. I think it's so important. Investment and intentionality in training, but also educate company wide. So it's not just about training a small pocket. It's really about training the entire organization, right? And I completely agree. Find out what the employee needs in order to make them successful at work. Again, one size does not fit all. We should really better understand the needs of specific employees and what will help them to succeed. Provide them with as much support as defined by them during the hiring process. Show them that you support them. Yes. Develop a trauma-informed lens in the organization. Yes. Professional development and trauma-informed leadership. Okay, great. Remote work policy flexibility, internal resource affiliation, a support group. I think that that's very important because a lot of organizations do have a bunch of affinity groups, and sometimes there are not specific affinity groups for those for employees with disabilities, but that is something that should definitely be considered. Yes, be okay with one size does not fit all, make resources easy to find, create a culture of belonging and accessibility, having an open forum survey where people can ask for accommodations, allow them to be seen, surveys of access needs for all, implementing changes, universal design, right? And yeah, Elizabeth, I know you know a lot about universal design, and it's probably covered in your learning series, which we'll talk about as well. But continuously evolving their accessibility options, offering educational opportunities, right, specific to people with disabilities, whether online classes, etc. Adding alt text captions and transcripts. So actually, even within Kahoot, there are alt text options that that are available. So, which is one of the reasons why we like this format. Let their values about accessibility reflect in their policies, incorporate asking about people's needs during check-ins, educate company-wide, yes, respect, having ongoing training, surveying the needs of employees regularly, having mentorship, being present with disabled employees, yes, and as I mentioned, the disability employee resource group. Ensure that they have the same advancement opportunities, meet goals, include money for budget, as Elizabeth had mentioned, because you need money to make these accommodations. You need the resources. And it's so important to, just practice what you preach and not just say that you support employees with disabilities, but that you are actually creating a more inclusive and accessible environment. So those were some of the contributions from the participants. Elizabeth, do you have other reflections and thoughts?
Yes, this is a fabulous list. I can tell that you've been listening. This is great. I wanted to offer an intriguing piece. When you think about accessibility in your organization, most organizations are thinking outward. They're thinking about how I can get people into my organization. I have to make my communications and marketing accessible. I have to develop relationships with disability communities, etc., etc. But a lot of times organizations don't think about the internal process, which is really, really important. Because if they're going to be an accessible organization, they also have to have practices that reflect that internally. So, for example, having an access culture would be important to think about. And someone mentioned doing check-ins. So when you have meetings, anytime you have a meeting, having an access check-in where everybody goes around and talks about what their access needs are, because that removes the burden of um, of from for the person with the disability to have to reveal, oh, I need to read lips. In that way, everybody goes around and says what their access needs are. Sometimes their access need has been met, and maybe people need a glass of water. That's their access need. Sometimes people need to stand up and stretch because they have a lower back problem. Sometimes people need to step out because they have an insulin pump and they need to give themselves an injection. If someone's pregnant, they need to step out and use the bathroom or whatnot. So normalizing that helps you bring your whole self to work, and it lets people develop relationships with each other. They know more about what the other person needs and can be more sensitive and become more of an ally. And also, I love that someone mentioned employee resource groups. I think that's a wonderful way of, um, of helping people with disabilities and other allies feel included. And so having professional development accommodations in the budget is really, really super important. So if you're going to offer training to all of your employees, make sure that those accommodations are included so that other people with disabilities can participate. Having a culture of appreciation, having mentorship is super, super important. Mentors are really a wonderful way for helping people with disabilities to advance in their careers. Um, and so, with that, we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to let you know about my series. I'm going to be diving in a little bit more deeply into these um, into these topics. And the first session is going to be October 12th, and it's not too late to sign up. I'm going to be talking about ableism and how ableism shows up in our daily lives, and we talk about examples of ableism. I'll show some images, and we'll talk about the implicit bias that we may have about people with disabilities. And then I'll have another session on how to actually integrate accessibility into your organization. And then finally, the last session is creating accessible virtual programs, events, or meetings. We've talked about some of this here and how we can make virtual meetings more palatable for people with disabilities and more accessible. So I hope you will join me in that series, and I'm going to pop the link in here. And feel free to email me if you have any questions about that. And that's coming up next week. So I hope to see you there. And I would love to see if we could go to the next slide. I would love to see, what are some things you plan to do differently following today's discussion? And you could type your ideas there. And in the meantime, feel free to come off mute and ask any questions that you have about any of the information. It's packed. If it's a packed hour, there's so much information, and I apologize if the Kahoot didn't work for some people. And I know that this information can be overwhelming because it's a lot to process. And we can spend, this is like a half day workshop, really. So we've really packed a lot of information in here. But I hope, I really hope that it's gotten you thinking, at least starting to think. I'm sure many of you have already been thinking about it, but maybe it can give you some pieces, some golden nuggets for which you can take back to your organization and start to uh, bring up the conversation, because really the leadership needs to buy in. The leadership has to buy in to the whole idea of integrating people with disabilities into the organization. So, are there any questions, any burning thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I'm going to actually stop share screen so that anybody who wants to come off mute, then you can come off mute and we can see you, or for some reason.
Thank you, Dee, for saying that you are recommending that your clients budget for accommodation, be open and curious, and question your assumptions. Fantastic. Well, other things are you going to try? Yes, this is recorded, so we will definitely be sharing the recording after the session.
Yeah. I must apologize though that unfortunately I started recording a little late, so we don't have the beginning piece of it, but we will have most of it.
And I have a survey I would love for people to fill out if you do have time, because Betty and I love doing these things and we always want to improve. And I know the Kahoot can be challenging. So please take a moment to fill out that survey. That would be great.
Okay. First, Elizabeth, I must apologize. For some reason, I am not able to share screen again. It's an odd thing that's happening to my Zoom. You gotta love technology. Um, but we got some good input from the folks. So as we're waiting for more questions, some things that people said that they plan to do differently is to revisit their recruiting and retention protocol, have more conversations about how we can be more inclusive within our organization, enable captions, research what accessibility options are provided in my organization, share this information with my organization, speak up more, even if it can be scary and or draining. Ask my organization how they prioritize accessibility in DEI initiatives. Engage my work's existing affinity network to see how I can support them. Push for better meeting etiquette. Ask my team about their access needs. Let's see, asking internally how we are accommodating these initiatives. I've taken notes for when we hire again. Use meeting check-ins to ask folks where they are at. Continue to be a voice for accessibility and inclusion at every and any table. Practice better allyship, better recruiting and mindfulness. Expand my group of colleagues with disabilities. Be aware of my own ableist behaviors. My inclusion lens has changed. That's wonderful to hear. Incorporate accessibility check-ins and review recruitment language. So those are some of the things that have been mentioned as things people will do differently as a result of today's session. I just love seeing all this input and participation. Actually, if you all enjoyed this Kahoot format, just so that you're aware, Inspiring Diversity has a whole suite of different cultural competence Kahoots for different communities. And really it's about how do we build our cultural competence, learn about terminology, the successes, contributions, challenges, how can we create a more inclusive environment for various communities, and just to create a more inclusive environment for all of us. So if you enjoyed this format, please do get in touch. We have a whole suite of different Kahoots for different purposes and communities.
And please give us feedback. If the Kahoot wasn't working for you, please give us feedback about that. We're always learning and always seeking to improve. And feedback about anything that you learned and would like to have learned next time, that would be great.
Any questions? Okay. Well, Elizabeth, I always learn a lot. Every time I interact with you, I learn something new, and really today's discussion continues to force me to reflect on my own inclusive behaviors and what am I doing to create a more accessible environment at work, and then just more broadly, how am I being accommodative And so I think it's just so important for us to continue to have these conversations. I think we all grow as a result, and hopefully people will be able to bring back a lot of these ideas to their organizations as well. So not only develop individually and grow individually, but also help their organizations create a more inclusive environment.
And remember, it's progress over perfection. So don't try to be perfect. It takes baby steps. So any step you can take is going to be great. And you may not succeed at first, but you will learn. It's a learning process. It's a never-ending process, and there's no end to it. Accessibility is a journey. So keep that in mind. If you get frustrated, there's always some other resource out there that will help you, like me.
Yes. And Elizabeth is a great resource in this case. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we can wrap it up exactly on time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for spending time with us this morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Take care and have a great rest of the day. And be in touch, please.
Thank you.